The invitation had been printed on a material that refused to decide whether it was paper, metal, or something alive, and I had spent the last 10 minutes wondering if folding it counted as an act of war. The hall beyond the threshold opened like the inside of a thought too large to finish. Light drifted instead of falling, bending around pillars that slowly rearranged themselves as if trying to look busy. Every step echoed a half-second late, which did nothing for my confidence and a lot for my imagination. I reminded myself, not for the first time, that I was not important. I was here as an observer, a courtesy inclusion, a polite checkbox in an interstellar agreement. My plan was simple: enter, find an empty seat, become furniture. Preferably furniture with a low profile and no diplomatic consequences. The crowd was already seated. Thousands of beings, most of them tall, elegant, and equipped with biology that made my own feel aggressively average. Their long ears rose and curved in subtle variations, some adorned with thin bands of light, others bare and expressive, twitching in ways that suggested private conversations conducted entirely through cartilage. I kept my eyes forward, which was difficult because everything else was staring back. Not openly, of course. Alien nobles had perfected the art of looking at you without admitting it, the way cats did when they were about to knock something expensive off a shelf. I spotted an empty seat near the rear curve of the hall. It looked mercifully unremarkable, not glowing, not humming, not surrounded by armed guards. A good, honest chair. I angled my body toward it, adopting the casual stride of someone who definitely belonged and was not internally rehearsing an apology to the galaxy. That was when the room went quiet. Not dramatically at first. Just a thinning of sound, as if someone had gently lowered the volume on reality. My first thought was that I had stepped on something sacred. My second was that my shoe had come untied in a culturally offensive way. I slowed, then stopped, feeling the weight of attention settle on my back like a physical thing. "You," a voice said, translated directly into my skull with a clarity that made my ears feel redundant. I turned. She was already standing. I hadn't noticed her before, which in retrospect felt impossible. She didn't dominate the space so much as define it. Her presence gave the hall a center of gravity. She looked almost human, unsettlingly so, except for the long ears that swept back in a graceful arc and the eyes that held too much patience for someone who ruled by accident. The light seemed to like her. It lingered. She stepped forward. Each movement was precise, unhurried, the kind of confidence that came from knowing the universe would wait. When she reached me, she didn't hesitate. Her hand closed around mine, warm, steady, undeniably real. "You're sitting with me," she said. It wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The words rippled outward, bending protocol, expectation, and several visible spines. Somewhere behind me, a noble inhaled sharply enough to qualify as a protest. I meanwhile was busy trying not to faint or laugh hysterically, both of which felt inappropriate for different reasons. "I was actually aiming for that seat," I said, nodding weakly toward the back, because panic had robbed me of my better instincts and left me with honesty. One corner of her mouth lifted, not a smile, a recognition. "That seat is lonely," she replied. "This one is not." She didn't wait for agreement. She guided me forward, and the aisle seemed to stretch, each step accompanied by the soft hum of translation fields adjusting to my rapidly deteriorating dignity. As we walked, I became aware of how quiet the hall had become. Long ears angled toward us, frozen in disbelief. Guards stood rigid, their hands hovering near weapons that suddenly seemed very symbolic and not at all useful. I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "For the record," I whispered, "I am extremely underqualified for whatever this is." Her eyes flicked toward me, amused. "Good," she said. "The qualified ones are exhausting." We reached the dais. The seat beside hers was ornate, alive with slow-moving patterns that reacted to my proximity as if surprised. I sat carefully, half expecting it to eject me into space. It did not. That felt like a small victory. As I settled, I felt the weight of the moment press in, immense and undeniable. I had wanted invisibility. Instead, I had been chosen. Why, I had no idea. But as the Empress folded her hands and the ceremony resumed around us, I caught my reflection in the polished surface before me and realized, with a flicker of incredulous humor, that history had a terrible sense of timing and an even worse sense of irony. The seat adjusted itself under me with a polite shiver, reshaping to accommodate a skeleton that evolution had clearly rushed. I tried not to react, which was difficult because the chair appeared to be scanning my intentions and judging them mildly. Around us, the ceremony resumed in a careful, fragile way, like music starting again after someone dropped a priceless instrument. I could feel the stares, thousands of them. Long ears angled, twitched, flattened, rose again. If attention were radiation, I would have been glowing. "Relax," the Empress said quietly, her gaze forward. "They're not angry yet." "Comforting," I murmured. "Is there a schedule for when they become angry, or is it more spontaneous?" Her ear closest to me tilted slightly, which I was beginning to recognize as amusement. "There will be a pause, then whispers. Then someone will request an interpretation of ancient protocol that hasn't been relevant since your species discovered fire." I said, "the classics." The first speaker stepped forward, a tall noble whose robes shimmered with embedded data filaments. As he began reciting formal praises, the words flowed through the translation field into my mind, accompanied by a faint aftertaste of ozone. I tried to listen, I really did, but my peripheral awareness kept screaming that I was sitting beside the most powerful being in this sector, and my hands didn't know what to do with themselves. I folded them, unfolded them, rested them on my knees. The chair hummed disapprovingly. "You can stop apologizing to the furniture," the Empress said. I wasn't. "It can tell." Of course it could. As the speech droned on, I leaned slightly closer. "So," I whispered, "hypothetically, if a human were to accidentally cause an interstellar incident by existing in the wrong seat, what would the cleanup look like?" She considered this. Historically, an inquiry, a cultural symposium. Several strongly worded holograms. And optimistically. She glanced at me then, really looked, her eyes reflecting layers of data I couldn't see. "Optimistically," she said, "we would call it a correction." The word settled between us, heavier than it should have been. The noble finished. Another took his place. The cadence of the ceremony continued, ancient and precise, while beneath it I could sense motion, messages flashing between aides, guards subtly repositioning, probability engines recalculating futures that now included me in a very inconvenient variable slot. I swallowed. "You know everyone thinks this means something, right?" "Yes, just checking." A pause. "It does mean something." I laughed, short and helpless. "That's less reassuring than you think." Her lips curved again, that almost smile. "You humans," she said softly, "are remarkable. You assume meaning must be large to be dangerous." Before I could respond, a flicker of light rose between us, a discrete holographic interface visible only from certain angles. Symbols scrolled, biometric readings, legal glyphs, fragments of old treaties. I caught a glimpse of my name, translated into something that looked like a mathematical apology. "You've been watching me," I said. "For a long time," she replied. "You stood in silence when it would have benefited you to speak. You intervened once when it cost you nothing and gained you less. You treated one of my people as a person when you believed no one important was watching." I thought he was a janitor. Her ears lifted fully now. "Exactly." The realization made my chest feel tight in an unfamiliar way. All around us, the ceremony pressed on, unaware or pretending to be. I shifted in my seat, suddenly very aware that whatever I'd done in the past had followed me here, across systems and years, distilled into this moment. "I should warn you," I said carefully, "I am not especially brave. I just have a poor sense of self-preservation and an allergy to unfairness." She inclined her head. "Then you are precisely what you appear to be." A murmur rippled through the hall. One of the nobles had finally stood, ears rigid with offense. He began to speak, his voice sharp even through the smoothing filters of translation. Protocol, tradition, impropriety. The Empress raised one finger. The sound vanished. Not silenced, removed as if it had never been introduced to the universe in the first place. She stood again, and this time when she spoke, the hall leaned in. "This seat," she said calmly, "is not a reward. It is not a statement of dominance. It is recognition." Her hand rested lightly on the armrest between us, close enough that I could feel the warmth without touching. "You may sit where you wish," she continued, "but you will not decide who belongs." The noble sat down, very carefully. I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath long enough to qualify as a medical event. I glanced at her. "So," I said, attempting levity as my pulse tried to escape my chest. "No pressure, but I think I may have just become a footnote in several textbooks." She looked at me, eyes bright with something like anticipation. "No," she said, "footnotes are optional." And for the first time since entering the hall, I suspected that invisibility had never been on the table at all. The remainder of the ceremony unfolded with the careful restraint of something that had already broken once and was afraid to shatter again. Speeches concluded faster than tradition preferred. Ritual lights dimmed out of sequence. The hall itself seemed unsettled, its living architecture slowing its constant adjustments as if listening. I sat straighter without realizing it. Somewhere between panic and acceptance, something in me had recalibrated. If the universe insisted on placing me here, the least I could do was try not to slouch. The Empress noticed. She always noticed. "You've stopped planning your escape routes," she said quietly. "I ran out," I replied. "Every direction seems politically sensitive now." Her ear flicked. Approval, maybe, or amusement. With her, the two often shared a border. A small drone drifted forward, projecting a lattice of light that unfolded into a symbol recognized across dozens of systems. A binding acknowledgement, not a treaty, not an alliance, something older and rarer. The hall reacted instantly. Long ears rose in shock. A few nobles actually leaned forward, forgetting themselves. I leaned toward her. "If that thing explodes, is it aimed at me?" "It won't explode," she said. "It will listen." "That's worse." She smiled properly this time. "Warm, unmistakable, speak truthfully, it prefers that." The lattice hummed, attuning to my neural patterns. I felt it brushing against memories, not prying, just waiting. I swallowed. "All right," I said softly. "Here's the truth. I didn't come here to matter. I came here to observe, to learn, to leave without causing trouble. I still don't think I belong in this seat. But I do think people should be judged by what they do when no one is watching. If that's worth recognizing, then fine. I'll sit." The lattice brightened. Somewhere deep in the hall, an ancient mechanism accepted the statement and locked it into history. The Empress rose once more. "Let it be recorded," she said, her voice carrying without effort, "that this gathering recognizes courage without title, intent without ambition, and presence without conquest." The ceremony ended not with applause but with agreement. A subtle thing, more powerful. Later, as the hall emptied and nobles dispersed in tight, whispering clusters, I found myself walking beside her through a corridor that curved into impossible distances. The guards kept their distance now. The air felt lighter. "You could have chosen anyone," I said. "Someone trained, someone prepared." She glanced at me as we walked. "Prepared people expect reward. You didn't." We stopped before a balcony overlooking the city, an alien metropolis glowing with layered light, transit streams threading between towers like veins. I rested my hands on the railing, feeling the faint vibration of a civilization in motion. "So what happens now?" I asked. "Now," she said, "you return home." I blinked. "That's it. For today." She turned to face me fully. "You will speak of what you saw, not as propaganda, not as threat, as witness. And when your people are ready to sit at this table without fear or hunger for advantage, you will return. And if they're not," her gaze softened, "then you will still have been honest." I considered that. The old version of me would have searched for the trap, the cost, Instead, I nodded. "I should warn you," I said, smiling despite myself. "I'm still just a guy who looks for empty seats." She reached out briefly and squeezed my hand. "Not anymore," she said. "Now you know why the seats matter." When I left the palace, the night air felt different. Or maybe I did. I was still human, still small in the grand scale of things. But I had learned that invisibility was not safety, and that being seen, truly seen, came with responsibility. As my transport lifted away, I looked back once more at the city of long ears and quiet power. Somewhere inside it, an empress was reshaping the future with deliberate patience. And somewhere inside me, a man who once wanted to disappear had learned how to sit, stay, and be counted.